What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's spoiler-filled TV discussion of the first 3 episodes of the reimagined Bel-Air, which premieres on Peacock. Now, before we begin, if you like this channel, awesome, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome, hit that like button, as well as comment below any video to watch, including this one. Okay, so here we are. We officially have the first 3 episodes of Bel-Air. The reimagined dramatic take on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is officially released on Peacock right after the Super Bowl. Since this is recorded early, go whoever won the the Super Bowl. But as you see from my non-spoiler review, because this will be a spoiler discussion of the first 3 episodes, and I'll go week by week because I'm really intrigued with the show. I have a lot of thoughts on this series and what the reimagined take is doing. I did say in my non-spoiler review, I think The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is one of the most influential comedy shows of all time. It's up there with like The Honeymooners and I Love Lucy, and just what it was trying to do. Not only did it bring out, Alfonso Ribeiro and James Avery and Tatiana Ali and Karen Parsons, Joseph Marcel, and everything that happened, of course, with the Viv character, but it turned Will into a household name. He became a superstar when the show aired and when it went to the eventual 6 seasons that it went on. It's a show that really hit hard. It's one of those I watched as a kid. I watched every episode. It's just a great show with a great message, with characters that are very fun to watch, but they do hit on some really hard-hitting subjects, which really made the show very unique for what it was trying to do, very special in what it was trying to do. After watching the first 3 episodes, was like, I gotta talk about this in spoiler discussion. So, like I always do, especially when they release multiple episodes, this will be one big video, but you can skip to each episode if you don't want to watch each video. But yeah, so there we go. And so, like I said, once again in my non-spoiler review, this series has a really interesting back history to it. And what I mean by that is Morgan Cooper, who is an individual that basically decided one day on his own dime to hire a bunch of people, or just bring in a bunch of his friends or whatever he did, and to recreate Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but to do it in a very dramatic sense, I guess you could say, to turn it into a very dark and unsettling look into a kid who came from West Philadelphia to Bel-Air, to his family, the more realistic nature to that approach. And it was a viral sensation the minute it hit YouTube, because that's where he posted it. I think it was YouTube, if I remember right. In the process, because it became viral, it caught the attention of Will Smith, which was pretty crazy. And, Will Smith is an individual that is very passionate about his projects. If he finds something he likes, he's going to go for it. That's why he does like stuff like King Richard and, Pursuit of Happiness. He's gone very dramatic in his last few years because he wants to expand who he is. Because in the days of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, of course, as we know, he was more doing the comedy action, the Independence Days, the Men in Blacks and stuff like that. So when he found this project, it makes a lot of sense that he loved what he saw, and he immediately gave Morgan Cooper a deal through his, I think, Westbrook company to recreate and make a television show with the help of Peacock. Because this was literally like as soon as this thing became viral, it literally put this guy into the atmosphere or the stratosphere, and Morgan Cooper was able to develop a TV show with the blessing of Will Smith, and I'm assuming a lot of the other people. And so therefore they created Bel-Air, which was going to be a more dark and seething, but more realistic approach to this world that is very much was a comedy and, silly and over the top, but still had hard-hitting subjects and stuff like that. So here it is, the release date of this series, which is February 13th. But Bel-Air is like I said, series that's created by Morgan Cooper. It's actually showrun by, I believe, one of the people who did American Gods, but it brings in a very different style cast of people that you may recognize and you may not recognize. For instance, Jabari Banks is playing Will Smith. Adrian Holmes is playing Philip Banks. Cassandra Freeman is playing Vivia Banks. Olly Sholotan is playing Carlton Banks. Coco Jones is playing Hillary Banks. Akira Akbar is playing Ashley Banks. Jimmy Akingbola is playing Jeffrey. Jordan L. Jones is playing Jazz. And Simone Joy Jones is playing Lisa, who actually, if I remember right, doesn't even come in until like the 3rd season or something like that in the actually original series. It's a different cast. It's a wholly different look into a world that is, what is Bel-Air. And And so what we'll do is, of course, let's talk about the 3 episodes. We're going to start with the first episode, which, of course, is Dreams and Nightmares, which is episode 1, is written and directed by Morgan Cooper himself, who was a creator. And in essence, the first 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a little bit lesser than that, is in essence the expanded version of what we saw in the intro to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which was expanded in the first episode of the original series. But here we're getting the dramatic take of that. So it starts out with Will on his throne, as we see in the music video and stuff like that. And in essence, Will Smith, as the character is named in the series, is a huge basketball star. He's going to get a scholarship. He lives in West Philadelphia, born and raised, and he has a great game. He loves his mother. His mother is like really trying to get him to go to a college, maybe outside in Connecticut and stuff like that. And one night, as we know from the song, he goes up against a hoodlum, I guess you could say, a very unscrupulous guy, I guess you could say, who is playing against Will in a basketball game. You see where this is going. He's playing him a basketball game. It goes wayward, sideways, because this is a dramatic version of it. It in essence involves Will picking up a gun, getting arrested. The guy who is basically the very unscrupulous person threatens to kill Will. There's a lot of this is not your father's Fresh Prince. There's a lot of language in this series, a lot of F's, a lot of a lot of terms that are very negative in connotation. But it uses a lot of language. There's a lot of violent speak. There's basically the guy who threatens Will threatens to kill him. And of course, he spends the night in jail, but is of course released, thanks to his uncle Philip Banks in L.A. And this is when it's decided that, of course, Will, thanks to his mom, is going to be sent to Bel-Air to have a better life, as the series was doing in the original series. That's where this is going. Of course, Will doesn't want that to do it. He doesn't want to have anything to do with that. But his mom's like, "You need to go. You can't live here. You need to get away from this." And it in essence sees him flying to LA. He gets into a cab, which they do a nice little spin, because this is when we're introduced to Jazz, which of course is the DJ Jazzy Jeff from the original series, but now he has the vehicle. It's a really kind of good way to kind of condense everything, but make it kind of unique for what it's worth. It is funny that when you're watching the episode, they actually use pieces of the song to basically fill out stuff. So he's like, Jazz is like, "Oh, you must be from Philadelphia. I'm guessing a West Side." And then Will goes born and raised. So that was fine. It's a little chintzy in a lot of respects, but I think, it works for what it's worth. So, and this is when the series becomes truly interesting. The stuff that we see at the beginning is dark, it's unsettling, but this world of Bel-Air, when it's not your father's Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, really takes an effect, because the Jazz and Will drive up to the mansion, which is the Banks mansion, and it's full of really attractive cars, really attractive women. They're having a party, for the donors that are donating to, of course, Philip's his search to become mayor or governor, whatever he's going to become, like it was in the original series. But what's really interesting is Jeffrey, the butler, the guy who's the kind of the head of the household that's not Philip, is in essence a more streamlined character. He's less, I want to say, regal, I guess you could say. He's more of just kind of a guy who's more just kind of a protector a lot of ways. He's more of an Alfred in the 20th century or 21st century than he is in like the 20th century. So it's a much more updated character. So it feels more realized, I guess you could say. And then we're introduced to, of course, Vivian Banks, who is very similar in aspect. She's a very stern woman, but she's a very loving person. She's, of course, the sister to Will's mother and stuff like that. And this is when they kind of 180 some of the characters. We're introduced to Hilary Banks, who was not the smartest character. Karen Parsons was always amazing in the series, but this is a completely different version of Hilary Banks, where she in essence is a influencer, which fits her character. She's very much leaning towards popularity and trying to gain that momentum, as because she has the means and the power, she's been able to do. But she's a very smart individual. She knows how to use who she is to influence the people around her. You know, she in this series is a cook. She's a lot smarter than what she used to be. So it's a complete 180 of a character, and it's going to be interesting to see how her character rolls. If they expand upon her character more, if she gets more than what she was sometimes getting in the original series. But on top of that, you know, we're introduced to Ashley Banks again, and Ashley's more like she was in the original series, where she, you know, Will's like, oh, I remember when you were little, blah, 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 blah. But there's no real, like, movement with her character just yet. So she's kind of, like, left to the side. But we'll talk about her eventually, I'm sure. And that leads to, outside of Philip Banks, which we'll talk about in a second, that leads to the biggest 180 of a character that actually took me by surprise, because I didn't watch the trailers before this. I was excited to see the series because Fresh Prince, like I said, is one of my favorite series of all time. We are introduced to Carlton Banks. Now, Carlton Banks was an individual played by Alfonso Ribeiro. He was very much the kind of like the Urkel, where he was very goofy, he was very nerdy, but he had a lot of heart to him. He, of course, had his dance, the Carlton dance, stuff like that. And he was an individual that kind of eked himself into your heart after a while. Will, and of course, they had their differences between him and Carlton, but they found their way when the series ended and they became brothers. Here, what's really interesting is Carlton's an alpha male in this series. He's very rich. He acts like he's very rich. He acts like he's very uppity, a lot of aspects, which what Carlton's character is. But in this series, as we learn, he doesn't like Will. Like, he hates Will. Like, he wants Will to go away. He doesn't care what happens to him. And, you know, they haven't seen each other for a while. This is a individual that really despises anyone that is affecting his family. I get it. He's protective, but it's crazy. Like, it was complete, like, blowing in the mind how different Carlton is in this show. And I was just like, wow. It gets really dark with what his character does, but he is a much more popular individual. He's more popular with the kids at school. But in essence, we meet Philip Banks, which is the guy, you know, the main patriarch of the show, the one that really teaches Will the lessons, the life lessons. He's the one that saves Will the most. He's the one that changes Will the most. But he, as we saw with James Avery, just a very important character to who Will become. And you see that from the very beginning, even though he's trying to get the donors to donate to his cause, you know, to become mayor or whatever he is, or the governor or whatever it is. We see Will struggling with what he feels like he's a charity case in a lot of aspects. And Philip has to calm him down. Philip has to remind him that he's brought out here to have a better life, that he did some stuff that was really stupid, and he's trying his best to get Will into a much better life. You know, Will gets really angry by this, but then they kind of have a talk later on, which is very much what the Fresh Prince did. It leads to a phone call where his friend in Philadelphia is like, this guy that wants to kill you, and he's going to search for you, and I'm afraid I'm going to die. And it's really dark. It really is. It's really, the series, even though I knew it was going to be dark, I knew it was going to be a different take on the series in a dramatic, more hard-hitting sense. I still wasn't prepared for what I was getting myself into. This is a series that's going to not make a lot of people happy. There's people that are going to really enjoy this. Like, I ended up enjoying it more than I thought I was going to. But the difficult nature is that first original series with Will Smith was so iconic for what it's worth. And now you're bringing a whole complete 180 take on this series, and you're thrusting in characters that are well beloved, and you're doing something completely different with it. It's very interesting. Like I said, they're throwing a lot of language. They're throwing a lot of graphic content, a lot of dark material with like violence and stuff like that. And it's a completely different show. But this is also where we see Will, basically for most of the episode, for about 25 minutes of the episode, Will and Carlton are going back and forth. They're arguing. They're shouting obscenities at each other. You know, they go to of course, Bel-Air Academy, which is one of the 5 richest schools in the country or whatever. And, you know, Will sees Lisa for the first time, very much attracted to her. There's going to be, of course, an arc, I'm sure. I don't see how it goes, but Will walks into the where they take showers and stuff like that, the locker rooms, and he sees Carlton around a bunch of white people, you know, white individuals. And they're singing like a lot of, singing a lot of rap songs and stuff like that, which is, I don't whatever. I don't care about that, but it triggers Will in a way that would be a little differently played out in the original series. I keep going back to the original series just to kind of make a point how different this series is. It's also it's also, instead of being a half hour, it's an hour long, which is kind of interesting. But Will gets triggered. He gets upset at the individuals. The white individuals are, very, at this point, a little stereotypical. They're a little, they're trying to make, Morgan Cooper is trying to make a point about how an individual that comes from a very different place in the world comes into this world, and it's just complete culture shock in a lot of aspects. And I think Will find his place as this show moves along, I'm sure. But what ends up happening is it leads back to the house. Carlton and Will try to find some even ground. And one of the biggest moments that was like, oh my God, this is a change for Carlton. He's snorting what we think, I guess it's like a drug to keep him like stimulated, stuff like that. It looks like cocaine, but it's something else or whatever. But he's a very angry individual. This is not the dancing Carlton that we know. He's a very angry individual, and it shows at the very end of this episode, the pool party, where Will is talking to Lisa, who's the ex of Carlton. Carlton had an ex named Lisa, and now Lisa's very much interested in Will. They have Will and Lisa have the very early startings of a conversation, so on and so forth. And as we saw in the beginning of the episode, Will is on the throne in a dream, and this is where dreams and nightmares, because Will keeps having dreams, he keeps having nightmares of just this world that he's kind of inhabited in his own brain. But Carlton gets so mad by this that he pushes Will into the pool, and there's this like really cool visual shot of Will just falling down to his throne like he's just in a different world, and Lisa comes down and saves him and brings him out of the pool. It seems like Will can't swim, which is interesting. And Will gets up, and right as the episode ends, and then, like I said, we'll talk about episode 2 here in a second, he goes to punch Carlton in the face, and it kind of goes to cliffhanger at the moment there. But that's where the episode ends. Like I said, it goes to credits and so on and so forth. But wow, I know I've skipped over some stuff, but wow, this series kind of took me by surprise. Not in the sense that I didn't know it was going to be dramatic, like I said earlier. It's the simple fact that it's so dramatic and so 180 in what it's trying to do that it's gonna be difficult to kind of take my brain that has known Fresh Prince of Bel-Air for so long, inject it with this new version, with this new dramatic sense, with this, Will Smith allowing his baby, his like original creation, or with he had other people help him, of course, and just do something completely different with the series. It's something that you don't see very often, and whether this series will be successful, whether people will latch onto it, whether people will be able to take their fandom of the original series out the door and kind of see if they can gel with this, is going to be interesting. So we'll see how it plays out. To me personally, I really enjoyed it. I was really shocked by how much I enjoyed it. It's not a very easy episode to watch. It's not a very easy start. It does some things that I think they need to work on when it comes to plotting, when it comes to how they stage things. I think this is the first episode that just needs to find some kind of bound and footing and conceptual idea to keep it forward, because they're going to get to a point where they're going to write themselves into a corner, and without the charisma of the character guy who's playing Will, it could flounder pretty easily. But like I said, this is a series that is running up against a wall just on the fandom alone. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, if I rank this first episode, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because I really did like it. I really felt that they're bringing something new to the table, but they're also honoring what Will Smith and the rest of the crew and cast and everybody who worked on that original series created, and they're at least trying to do some justice for that. So that is in essence the first episode, which is Nightmares and Dreamscapes. A little long talk, but like I said, it is a lot to talk about, especially for a first episode. So with that said, 9 out of 10, and let's head into the second episode. Okay, so episode 2 of Bel-Air is, of course, Keep Your Head Up. It's an episode that basically sees Will, in essence, going to Bel-Air Academy for his first week. I guess you could say it takes place pretty much over like the first few days of his schooling. And it has the ramifications right after the first episode, as it would in these types of shows, where the fallout of Will and Carlton has pretty much gone online. It's gone viral, as these things do. Fights are very popular, and when it comes to YouTube and Twitch and, TikTok and all these, channels and stuff like that. And basically, for most of the episode, is Will and Carlton at each other's throat. Will trying to be the better man, but Carlton constantly pushing him because his MO or his logical reasoning just, he can't handle the fact that Will is his cousin. He can't handle the fact that Will's from West Philadelphia. He can't handle the fact that it's upending the social norm of Bel-Air and his status as the king of Bel-Air Academy, which is really interesting because Carlton was always the popular, person in Bel-Air Academy, but he was also very, very, because he was affluent, very rich, he never had somebody that would contest him like Will does, so it bothers him. It really does. And he does all kinds of things in here to try to get at Will, like leaving him at home because he doesn't, when they're going to their first day of school, and constantly going back and forth, fighting with one another in the school. He gets confronted by Connor, who has a one of those where you have to like stay away from him for like 10 feet because this is what happens, and the whole logical reasoning of how racism works and stuff like that. And Carlton just throughout this episode just can't handle Will, and he can't handle that Will might become a better, more popular individual. And it shows in his view of the world itself, the way he's grown up, where Will, in essence, is in his first day, he goes into the classroom, there's no one in there. He comes out of the classroom and he's basically approached by the security officers like, what are you doing here? Let me see your ID. Will does what Will shouldn't do, where he runs. And in essence, he runs into this, they're having some kind of discussion or debate or whatever they're doing. And Carlton's basically like, instead of just, going around the world to help inner city individuals, why don't we do it here at home? It's basically a slight at Will for being an inner city kid, for not having what Carlton has. It's really just kind of an uncomfortable thing to watch because Carlton, like I said, we're used to Ovando Ribeiro's version of Carlton. To see this kind of complete 180 individual who is the popular kid, the one that has, everything, Lisa, who was once his girlfriend and stuff like that. When everything starts turning, he starts to become what his true persona is, which is just a very spoiled, very conniving, just not a very good person. And you just watch the whole thing. You watch how he reacts when Will makes the basketball team. You watch how just everything kind of plays down, and it's so weird to watch. It really is. I don't hate it, but it's just such a weird kind of take on a character that you're so beloved. And this is what's so hard about the show and loving Fresh Prince so much, is just how you have to view these characters now, because they're taking the idea of what Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is, making it modern, but it still is dealing with the same problems with, African Americans in the United States, African Americans in today's society, of course, with, the George Floyd incident, everything that happened with that, and how they're looked at as down upon a minority aspect. And it's just really crazy to watch that even now this stuff is still prescient. I mean, you look at what happens in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, it's much more hyper realized, I guess you could say, and much more in your face, like it should be, because this is what this show is now, affecting. It's just, how does a affluent African American community or African American individuals deal with racism and so on and so forth. So watching somebody like Carlton have to deal with, Will's character and how Will is completely different at 180 of who Carlton is fascinating. It really is. It's different. It's something that it's going to take some time to get used to, but it still has the machinations, the kind of interesting little ticks that what Carlton, because Carlton, like I said, is very affluent and stuff like that. And that's pretty much where Carlton leads. I'll talk about the very end of the episode, kind of where I think Carlton's going to go, but I just kind of leave it there for a second. Before we get into the Will stuff, before we get into, the Philip stuff, I do want to talk about Hillary's character, who I love what they're doing with this character, because they're making her an influencer. They're making her someone of substance, not just an airhead. And what's great about her character is she is basically offered an interview with the online food group or whatever, magazine or whatever it is, and she makes her food, she talks to her people, her I think it was like TikTok or Instagram, folks, and she has like the nice bright dresses, which was what Hillary was always known for, and she's very capable of making some really good dishes, as we see at the breakfast table. And she's interviewed by these two individuals who unfortunately happen to be white individuals. So you kind of see where this is going. And it's not to stereotype the white individuals in the show. It's just the unfortunate nature of how society has become, how things are run, so on and so forth. But it's just playing out that fact that it's still a predominantly one-sided situation. So anyway, she makes food. They love the food. And then the two interviewees basically go, well, we wouldn't mind offering you a job, but we need you to be more sensible in your apparel and everything you say on your influencer, like TikTok and stuff like that. It has to be approved by us and so on and so forth. And we need you to tone down your foods, like tone down the spices, tone down, because it's just not what our audience wants, is where Hillary's character basically is leaning towards it. She's very proud of who she is, and she's very proud of her history. This sets her off in a lot of aspects because she goes on TikTok or Instagram, whatever they have in this world. I think it's TikTok or something like that. And she tells how it is. She's like, it's basically, if you're an African-American person, you'd be very offended by this. And that's absolutely 100% true because, the thing about Vivian, who's the mother in the series, is she wants everybody in her family to succeed, to do better than what she had to go through. But she has a little bit of a step back when she kind of confronts Hillary about the whole fact that she denied wanting to work for this company because it wouldn't be who she was. It takes somebody for like Hillary to kind of push into the simple fact that why would I want to change myself? And this can be for anybody, but it's very prevalent in the show. Why would I want to change myself for something I don't believe in? And that's 100% true. She has food that she's made from her grandparents' recipes, and she has all these things that are very of her. So why would she basically tear down what she is to be something that she doesn't want to be? And that's really a powerful statement because it can fit into any realm or fact or reason where we try to fit ourselves in this bubble. We try to fit ourselves in this situation. And what we end up doing is just putting ourselves in a box. It's like in the Friends episode, we're not putting ourselves in a box anymore and stuff like that. And, I found that really kind of heartwarming in a lot of aspects. I found it really powerful because Hillary is now a character that you understand. She's like the surrogate of this situation that she has to go through, that she sees herself in, that even in 2022 or 2021, whatever this series is set, it's still a problem. It really is. And it really shows that it just needs a change. But, as Philip tries to say, or Vivian tries to say, it's slow steps that we have to get there eventually. So I really like that part. I think it's a really well-written character. I think she's the most interesting so far, even though I like Will. And I hope they change Carlton, maybe give him a little more positivity than what he's getting. But I like her character the most in the series, believe it or not. I think she's one of the most well-written characters and has a lot to say for what this world is doing and so on and so forth. So. And it's the same thing for Philip. Philip is, in a lot of respects, trying to be the district attorney, as he always was in the TV series with James Avery. And what's really interesting is he goes on a radio station and he's asked questions like, Black Lives Matter, which is an important thing. But then he's asked, how rich are you? What's your house square footage? He's like, that's not the point here. He's trying to do good. He's trying to make the world better. But I think he kind of makes the mistakes of, for instance, when Will does what he does at the beginning of the episode, he talks to Jeffrey, he questions whether Will is in the right place. He even does this with Viv. And what's really interesting is how the differences play out from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where James Avery's Philip character was a little hard on Will, but there was some passion there. There was some drive to make Will better than what he had to deal with in West Philadelphia. And Viv is the one character as well who loves her nephew and wants his nephew to do whatever he can, but has to kind of change a little bit about who she is because Will is not a Bel-Air person. He's from West Philadelphia, comes from a very different background, and they have to kind of change a little bit there. But what's really interesting is Jeffrey, who's always been that kind of Jiminy Cricket type character, where it's the individual that had always talks in your head about how do you fix the situation. He talks to him, he's like, you have to let Will be Will. You can't change him. He needs to adapt his character to what he needs to be. He needs to learn from his experiences. So if the experiences are bad, he has to learn from them, but you have to be there. You have to support him. You can't just give up on a guy after like 2 weeks of being there. And I thought that was really powerful stuff. And, he goes out and plays basketball with, of course, Will. And he explains, just how the situation rolls. You kind of have to go with it because they're changing, but they're not changing 100% right now. So there's a lot of really interesting talk. And of course, Carlton's just sitting there with an angry, smug look on his face, and he's just mad at the world. And I think that's the purpose of Carlton right now, is he's just mad at the world. But it's really interesting stuff that happens with his family. I really wish they would do more with Ashley. I'm thinking that her character is going to get more expanded maybe if they do a season 2, they'll give her more to do. Right now, she's just kind of a background character, which kind of stinks. There's not much to her, but she shows up in a couple scenes and so on and so forth. So, but of course, the Will stuff is, always the prominent stuff. Will is going to his first week of course, Bel-Air Academy. He's having the problems with Carlton. His friend Trey gets shot in the shoulder, which is, I didn't even think about this until I was watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air the other night. Trey, of course, was played by Don Cheadle in the original series. He was a character that popped up in the first season. I'm pretty sure this is the same character, just done in a different light. Trey, of course, gets shot. Will's worried about it. You can tell there's a love there, a brotherly love there. So he's calling him, FaceTiming him, making sure he's all right. He knows that there's a problem with this drug dealer and West Philadelphia and stuff like that. So Will's dealing with that, and he's dealing with trying to navigate high school or Bel-Air Academy. He's trying to make the basketball team. He's trying to deal with Carlton and Lisa and how everybody's looking down on him and Connor and blah, 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 blah. It's really just a kid who comes from a different background, put in a place where it's very much him against the world, a lot of aspects, which is, something that really is realistic, especially when you go to a new place or a new school. If you're a young kid and you come from a different background, it's always going to be very difficult to kind of work your way into the background. That's where we meet, I think, Trevor, Troy, or whatever his name is, and he becomes kind of a friend to, of course, Will. And I think he's one of the characters that kind of had a small supporting part in the original series. He makes the basketball team, as we expected, because he's a basketball player, very good at what he does. He kind of learns to be a supporting player, a player. He goes back and forth with the basketball, and he makes the team, and so on and so forth. And it basically leads to the final conclusion, which I didn't talk about because they don't want us talking about until the series premieres, which is what the series has done today. Is Will is leaving campus, and of course, the same security guard stops him, says, "I want to check your backpack." It just figures that there would be something that would cause a cliffhanger at the end of this episode. And the security guard finds a packet of whatever, cocaine, drugs, whatever it is in his backpack. And of course, Will is being framed because Will is that individual where you never would expect him to be carrying drugs. It's just not who he is. So, I figured maybe it was Carlton, but of course, as we learned, it's Connor. Connor has done this, and the look on Carlton's face makes me wonder where his trajectory is going to go, whether he's going to be angry, whether he's going to be, against Connor. What's he going to do? There's almost like a sadness in his appearance, or like getting back at you type of situation, or whatever it seems to be. I didn't really care for that moment very much. It seems like a way to up the tension, up the dramatic material. It felt a little out of place, but I guess I get it. I don't know, but it's one of those things where you just kind of have to see where it goes in the third episode, which, like I said, I'll talk about after this one. It's really just another episode, just kind of proves that this dramatic take on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is something that has its place in this world, which I thought was kind of fascinating. I think this is a pretty decent episode. And is it as good as the first episode? No, because I felt that episode really struck a pretty decent chord for a first episode, or for a second episode in the series, and it still is very keeps me wanting more. That's always a good thing. So with that said, for this second episode, which is Keep Your Head Up, I would give it I would say an 8.7 out of 9, or out of 10, I guess you could say. So very good episode, definitely worth a watch. Hopefully you like the first episode. There's gonna be some people that don't, but it is what it is. So anyways, with that said, let's move on to the third episode and the final episode of this week. Okay, so here we are at episode 3, which is called Yamakra, which is directed by Nick Kopus. This episode, of course, is a continuation of the last week's, or actually the second episode, I guess you could say. This is the last episode to premiere during the Super Bowl, or premiered the first week that the series premieres. And it literally kind of pretty much is the continuation, literally like right after what happens with Will, and his fact is, of course, accused of the drugs in his bag and stuff like that. And basically, Carlton and Will are confronted by Phil and Viv, and Will's like, I will do a drug test. I will do anything to prove to you that I'm not doing drugs, and so on and so forth. And you kind of get that there's something off about the situation. Carlton's kind of like, why would Connor do something like this? This isn't right. We'll get down to the bottom of this, or at least I'll try. You come to find out that, of course, Connor and Carlton knows what Connor did. They're worried about getting in trouble because that could do some serious effects to, their character, and him to go into Princeton, which is what Carlton always wanted to do. He kind of puts into motion. He's like, we need to fix this. We need to get Will off the hook. And Connor realizes that he may have made a fatal mistake. But like I said, we'll see how this plays out later on. But of course, Will's in suspension, or in detention, I guess you could say. He's suspended. He's in his own one-room classroom with kind of a douchebag teacher who, he's playing solitaire, but like Will can't, draw. He can't do anything. He has to do schoolwork, and maybe doesn't have any schoolwork or anything like that. So it's really just kind of like a way for Phil and Viv to basically talk to the principal and like, you need to have proof, blah, 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 blah. And then they realize that the principals and, of course, faculty didn't check the cameras, which is, of course, a failing on the system in general. Black kid has drugs in it. We're not going to do our actual job. So it's kind of they're going into the mindset of trying to basically prove that, he's being kind of accused for doing something that he probably didn't do. And it's basically cleared pretty quickly because this episode really doesn't deal much with that after effect of his drugs in his bag. It's really easily kind of taken care of. I mean, he's still under investigation and still might show up in the later episodes when they start releasing them week by week, but there's not really much there. To be fairly honest, it just kind of ends pretty easily. And it basically leads to two different storylines that kind of converge into one as the end of the episode ends. And it's basically, I'll talk about the Hillary and Viv stuff real quick. Or not real quick, I'll talk about them first because they're the more least used. Actually, they're kind of both equally, but I think the Viv and Hillary stuff's really interesting. And then basically, Viv offers Hillary a job there's going to be a fundraiser for, I think, lupus or something like that. And Viv's like, you can do your thing, blah, blah, blah. And so Hillary and Viv's like, Hillary, you can create, some appetizers, some hors d'oeuvres, do it, whatever you need to. And Viv is really much in the front that I think she worries about her daughter, in essence, not finding her kind of drive in life that she's doing, the TikToks and the, YouTubes and whatever she's doing to garner views. And of course, her video about the newspaper or the magazine company, of course, got 2 million views. So Viv is in this mindset that really, I don't think she understands what is going on. I think she feels a certain way, and maybe she feels guilty for the fact that, because she talks about how she used to be an artist, she was really successful until Philip came along, and things changed when she had Hillary. And there's a mindset there that she wants her daughter to have some kind of a way for her to be successful, but also for her to kind of have the netting, for money and stuff like that. And Hillary kind of claps back at her and says, not just that she doesn't believe her and stuff like that. And so the basically manager of the newspaper, or I'm sorry, of the magazine, comes up to Viv and is like, I gave you this chance for Hillary. I did all this stuff to help her get an interview. And it basically makes Viv look bad, and Viv gets really upset by it. But in essence, Hillary shows the video of what she did, talking about, how these individuals don't want, African-American style to their magazine. They're very, vanilla in a lot of respects. And that's just, it's the sad nature of the reality that these people live in, especially an African-American influential family that has a lot of, influence in the world. even they still can't get the things that they need, the progression that they need. And the ladies that, Viv hangs out with are like, Hillary did the right thing. She, showing off her who she is and why she is, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the magazine needs a change, so they agree with Hillary, which I think pisses off Viv. And when they get to the basketball game, which is where, of course, Will shows off his style. There's kind of a throwdown. Viv's like, all right, if you want to do this, you got to do it on your own. You got to get out of the house, and you've really shown me that you just don't really have any direction in your life. And I'm like, I understand where Viv's coming from, but we're in a different era of the world, a different generational. This is generation, I don't know, Z or X or Y, whatever generation we're currently in, do things differently. They do like YouTube and Twitch and TikTok. It's not traditional going to, work in a coal mine or go work in a traditional job. It's technology. It's the way things in the world change. For instance, me talking to some of you guys on a microphone and in front of a computer, and instead of going and working in a doctor's office or something. It's just when people have that passion, which is very, like I said, a very interesting kind of new way to approach Hillary's character. People of old will just not understand it, and they think they're people that just don't have any drive or passion, or they just don't adhere to the norms. And it's really showing what it's like for a different generation to have to deal with another generation. I mean, even today, in my generation from, the 80s and early 90s and stuff like that, we're starting to get to a point where the things that our kids are doing now, which, the 16, the 20-year-old, maybe a little bit older, a little bit younger, the knowledge that we don't have. And that's what Hillary's character is representing, is a whole new generational change from just the traditional norms of what the world is like. Yes, Hillary's rich. Yes, Carlton's rich. But Hillary's starting to show that there's a different path forward. And I thought that was really unique and really intriguing. Hillary's like, okay, that's how it's going to be. I will do what I need to do. And I pray that Viv's character changes and Hillary is successful, because if they turn Hillary into, a moronic character or a goofball or somebody who doesn't succeed, I think it's going to be a disservice to the character, to be fairly honest. I think it's going to be, just a way out, a cop out or something like that of a character that really has some intrigue to her. And she's one of my favorite characters on the show. I loved, the Hillary character from The Fresh Prince, but I always felt that she lucked into everything, that she used her wealth more to her advantage to, just buy clothing and stuff like that. Yes, she eventually became a reporter, but here there's actual substance to the character, which I really like. So I found that really an interesting arc to this week. I think it's really pushing something really unique and interesting, and we'll see how it plays out in the next 3 or 4. I think it's four more episodes, I think, in this season, if I remember right. I can't remember offhand, but it's gonna be really interesting to see. So the reason this episode is called Yamacraw is Philip has to get the endorsement from a reverend and a couple other people to help him become a DA. The reverend's really important to the community. There's been a falling out, so on and so forth. And in essence, what's going on, Will and Carlton seem to make a little bit of amends to just kind of go with, Phil, even though Carlton's he's always been that rich kid that has issues and stuff like that. Even in The Fresh Prince, there's always that aura about him, just how he uses the money in certain ways and so on and so forth. But there seems to be a little bit of amends. Will approaches Carlton about he knows Connor did it, and Carlton approaches Lisa about trying to reconcile just a little bit, of what happened. And Carlton's like, just let it go, man. It's done. You win, blah, 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 blah. So in essence, Will and Carlton go with Philip to the crawl boil at the Alpha Beta house, or Alpha House, or whatever you want to call it. And it's basically a really interesting way for somebody to kind of get votes to kind of show him who he is. And, the people around Phil, really feel like Phil's kind of fallen as somebody who was really important to the community. There was some beef that happened because of what Philip became, who became super rich because of his lawyer, stuff like that, and they feel that he has maybe lost his way a little bit, and there's animosity, there's some fighting and arguing back and forth. It's very traditional drama stuff that happens, especially in these types of shows. In essence, Will somehow, doing what Will does, even this would be something that Will would do even in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, is somehow make Phil look better than Phil already looks. Phil got in an argument. People were kind of not treating him very well. So Will's going to do what it takes to get Phil somewhat in the good graces of everyone again. Carlton, who is trying to get in the good graces of this doctor who's part of the scholarship for Black Minds, which is, trying to get into Princeton, trying to get, a little bit of the cost taken away and so on and so forth. Will actually does something that is a little triggering to Carlton, which has been kind of in the MO for this show to begin with, where Will goes, well, you're rich. You can just kind of rich your way into Princeton. And Carlton's like, that's not what I want to do. He wants to get that scholarship so he can prove himself and so on and so forth, so he can get in the good graces to make him look like he's not a rich individual, blah, 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 blah. But it's really interesting to see how Carlton at least attempts to get along with his cousin, but it all of a sudden goes back to everything that is a problem with the series so far, is the fact that Carlton just doesn't seem to want to change. And even Viv tries to approach him about just, he's your cousin, and even though he's a different type of universe than you are, it's just you have to work together. And what ends up happening is, Will is successful, Phil gets the good graces of the Reverend, Carlton feels like he can't get anything done, so he's back to his old conniving self. There's basically the end of this episode, there's two sections going on. The Carlton playing lacrosse, nobody's showing up because they're all going to see this new phenom that is Will. So all the family members of Will are there to watch the game. It's very successful. Will wins, as we expect in this type of series. But then Carlton, who starts getting distracted by the fact that his family is not there, he gets really upset. He cross-checks, which I guess is an ejectable offense for lacrosse. Gets kicked out. His coach wants nothing to do with it. He's like, you need to get the hell out of here. Carlton's freaking the hell out. And he goes in and he takes a bump of whatever drug he's taking. And he, in essence, walks into the arena where Will's playing basketball and sees at the last minute that Will wins the game and kind of just runs out of the room. And I hope by the end of the season there's some change. But it basically leads into kind of the okay, you're gonna go there moment where Will shows up on a news report or whatever, the Will Smith show, because he was really good at basketball. The guy who was threatening Will through the first two episodes, he has one of his cronies brings up a phone and he sees it and he's like, oh, I know where you're at, you stupid MFer, and stuff like that. And it's like, I really don't like it. I know it's trying to be more realistic in the nature of what Will Smith did and this guy and the vendetta quest he's going to go on, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when this guy approaches Will and how it affects with Philip, and who's going to get hurt. Is somebody going to get hurt? Is Carlton going to get hurt? What's going to officially happen? With that said, this episode I'll give an 8.5. I think the quality seems to be lesser and lesser as it goes along, but there's some things I really like that I didn't like. Like I said, the Hillary stuff's really interesting, but I think the Carlton stuff is getting a little too much, I guess you could say, but we'll see. I'm still on board. Like I said, 8.5 is still a great score just for what it is. But with that said, the overall combined score of everything, from all three episodes is it's like a 9. I mean, overall is a 9. It's like 8.9 or whatever it is. I'll just say it's a 9 because I think the show is effective. I think it works. I think it gets a little tropey in what it's trying to do. Some things are a little goofy. Some things are really dark and serious, which I was not expecting. I guess I should have been expecting, but you know where I'm going with this. And I think everybody who's in this show is doing a really nice job. So overall, 8.9 or 9, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a show worth watching. But yeah, I think that'll do it. I think that'll be my take on the first 3 episodes of Bel-Air. Like I said, it's a long video. That's why I put, points where you can watch each review. But in the comments below, what was your overall take on the first 3 episodes? Are you going to continue it? Do you still have problems with the fact that it's a remake or kind of redo of the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? All that good stuff. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.